We built something extremely powerful, and now we're afraid of it. Not because it's smarter than us, but because it reflects something we don't want to see in ourselves. That's really the whole story. But let me walk you through exactly what I mean. I've been studying Carl Jung now for 25 years, and what I'm seeing in our cultural reaction to AI is not new. Actually, the shape of it is ancient. Watch how people talk about AI. The mood swings wildly between euphoria and civilizational panic. The same person excited 6 months ago now feels quietly unsettled. The technology itself hasn't changed that dramatically, but how we feel it has. The shift that we're facing isn't really technological, it's more psychological. And it's happening at a depth most people aren't willing to look at. Carl Jung called this deeper layer the collective unconscious. It sits beneath your personal memories, your individual history, and your personal story. Jung says there is something much older, and this is a shared psychic ground that belongs to the whole species. Inside this space live the archetypes. These are ancient patterns that have been running through humanity for thousands of years. Nobody owns them, and nobody invented them. Certain moments in history wake them up. And this is one of these moments. Look at the stories and fairy tales we've told ourselves for centuries. The golem, the creature built to serve that eventually becomes uncontrollable. Or Frankenstein, the scientist who creates life but abandons it. Or the sorcerer's apprentice, the tool that exceeds its master. These are not random tales. They are the recurring dreams of a species anxious about what it creates. Every era of mankind told the same story in its own language, because the anxiety has never really been about the creation. It's always been about the creator. But Jung goes even deeper. What we're really seeing right now is shadow projection on a massive scale. We push down the drives we don't want to own. The hunger for total control, tireless productivity, judgment without mercy, power without empathy. Then we project them outward. And that's exactly what we did with AI. We encoded our own disowned shadow into the machine. And now we feel what stares back at us. I remember the first time I truly understood this in my own life. There was a person in my professional life I judged very harshly. For me, he was arrogant, relentlessly self-promoting, and always performing competence. One day, I asked myself Jung's uncomfortable question. What is it about this person that bothered me so specifically? And the answer hit hard. Because every quality I hated in him was something I carried inside myself, just better disguised. And that recognition, or admitting this fact, was painful. But it was also one of the most clarifying moments of my life. Jung called this pattern enantiotomia. What you worship most extremely eventually becomes what you fear most. Now, 3 centuries of worshipping control and efficiency created something we cannot control. And that's not a technological accident. It's actually psychological inevitability. Last year, I sat with an architect, 15 years of serious creative practice. She looked at me and said, AI is already doing half of my job. What's going to be left for me? And her fear wasn't really about workload. It was about identity, because she had built her entire sense of worth around being the visionary, the one with taste and creative judgment. And when these qualities were threatened, it felt like annihilation. That is the persona speaking. It's the professional mask we constructed for the world. And it's real and it's earned. It took us years to build it. But on the other hand, it's also not the whole self. When something threatens the persona, our ego experiences it as the end of who we are. And here is what I notice consistently. The ones most destabilized by AI are rarely the ones whose jobs are most at risk. They are the ones who build their entire worth around being the sharpest, most analytical person in the room. And now suddenly, something answers faster. And that is not an AI problem. That is a persona problem. So here is the question I want you to sit with. Which part of your professional identity are you most afraid AI can replicate? And why did that specific thing become the center of your sense of worth? That's one concrete thing you can do today. Open a real notebook and write down the single cognitive or creative ability you're most afraid of losing to AI. Just name it, one sentence. Then what will shift in the following days is that you start defending a capability and you start examining an identity. And that examination is where the real work begins. And that's exactly the reckoning I went through myself before AI was part of any conversation. I faced a career disruption. I was moving my family to Mexico, and I was starting over in a new country. I was testing myself through long fasts and endurance challenges. Not for performance, but to find out what remained when everything external was stripped away. And the tools that helped me weren't productivity strategies. Ultimately, it was Jung's shadow work. Learning to separate what I performed for the world from who I actually was. I've been studying Jung now since 25 years. And what I know, not from the books, but from my own life and from sitting with many midlife professionals through exactly this kind of reckoning, is this. The ones who navigate this disruption with the most integrity are not the ones who had the better information about AI. They are the ones who had done the inner work, who knew the difference between their persona and their self, who had examined and integrated their shadow instead of projecting it. So the fear of AI is not the problem. It is an invitation. Not to understand machines better, but to understand yourself more deeply. And that is also not a crisis. That is an individuation catalyst. Now, if something in this landed, not just as information, but as a recognition, then you already know what the next step is. And you understand it was never really about AI. The specific unease you felt while watching points to an archetype that has been running your career longer than AI has existed. The career archetype test in the description below identifies it precisely. Check it out and thank you for sitting with me today. And keep in mind, we built AI from our own shadow, and now we fear what we see in the mirror. And that's really the whole story.